Every second counts in the fast-paced world of water damage restoration, and efficiency is critical. Recognizing this urgency, CoreLogic is rolling out a solution that the industry needs. This emerging innovation empowers field technicians by allowing them to take the lead and create instant floor plan sketches with smart technology. In this special episode of Straight Talk, we're going to dig into the details that you need to engage and onboard this technology. And to do this, I welcome Brandon Burton. He's the Senior Principal of Industry Relations with CoreLogic. Brandon, welcome to the program. It's great to have you back on Straight Talk.
Jeff, great to be with you.
We're going to talk about something pretty cool. I know this is close to your heart. The launch of a new innovation for the restoration market. I don't know much about it. It's called Mitigate. I'll tell you one thing. I love that name, Mitigate. Perfect.
It's a project that's been, near and dear to my heart, I think, for longer than I've even been around the software space. I have a passion for the technical side of our industry and the standard of care for our industry with, ANSI and IICRC's S500. So to have an opportunity to participate with CoreLogic and really pour my heart into documentation is something I've been super excited about. And that's what Mitigate's all about. It's about a tool, that is really intended to allow technicians to do really what's probably one of the more challenging parts of their job, and that it's getting accurate data from the field in real time. And that's what Mitigate's all about.
Well, Brandon, you and I go way back. You've written a lot of articles for CleanFacts. I don't know how many to help the industry. This sounds like another way to do that with this innovation. I'd love it if you would share some details about the inspiration, the research and development, and maybe some information on the initial testing.
Yeah, so we have taken a long time intentionally to develop the Mitigate application. A big part of that has been spent in two phases of testing. We had an alpha phase where we got a very, very early version of the application out with a handful of restoration contractors to really kick the tires on some of what we felt were the core principles in how the app was going to be built. We then transferred into a beta phase, and being new to the software space, this is not something that I had really gone through before. I come from the hardware side of the industry. But that beta phase ended up with about 600 individual testers, all restoration contractors and technicians that are out there, in the trenches using the app on real jobs, and then letting us know what worked, what didn't work, where the assumptions were right, where the assumptions were wrong, and why isn't this button here, and why can't I capture, this piece of information at this time. And that really helped us refine and hone the application against our true target. And I can't stress this hard enough. The target of an application like that is that it needs to be an environment that a technician is comfortable operating in. And we're talking about the technicians that are in the trenches doing the work in the real world of water mit, which are folks that, they don't want to spend a lot of time, typing out notes and spending a lot of time looking at graphs and data. They want to get their job done. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when they've been called out to a water mitigation project and they're crawling around on their back in a crawl space, the last thing that they want to do is sit down and think really hard about documentation. So that really helped us prove that out and build an app that's truly unique, that really fits that tech and the realities of that tech.
Be a lot of happy technicians out there once they get to use this product, this innovation. You touched about the challenges that Mitigate will help solve. Are there any other serious or the real headaches of the industry that this is going to help with?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways you can think about why documentation is important in water mitigation. It serves a lot of different roles in the way that the relationships kind of are built around, the cycle of a restoration project, right? And the documentation is really there to ensure that the story is being told. I work with a gentleman named Clark Hawkins at CoreLogic that really emphasizes this statement. I appreciate it every time he says it. But at the end of the day, if the documentation isn't the advocate for the project, it's not telling the story for the project, then the documentation's not doing its job, right? So the kind of the pain points that this touches on is It starts with the technician, right? I need the story because I may not be the technician that was on the job the first day. I may be the technician that's there the second day, right? Because, we had technician A that was on call, went out, did the emergency service. Now I'm the scheduled technician in this area doing the follow-up monitoring visits. I've got to know what was done, why was it done, where was it done, what do I need to do to validate that what was done is working, and how do I get that information as quickly as I possibly can so it doesn't slow me down, right? So it doesn't add time to what's already kind of a loss for a mitigation company. That those monitoring, trips aren't a moneymaker, right? They're a necessary step, they're a critical step, they're a huge risk management step, but they're not a moneymaker. So I can't add a lot of time to that process. So it starts with the technician, but then it carries up to the office. The next pain point is I'm sitting at the office and I'm doing the estimating, I'm doing the project management, and I've got to know, do I have the right resources going out to this project? Do I have it prioritized right? Right. So is this the highest priority project for monitoring the next day? Is it the lowest priority project for monitoring the next day? Do I need to send one truck, a box truck? Do I need to send desiccants out? What do I need to send and why do I need to send it? And then from there, it goes up the chain in the office to the actual project manager that is having to communicate with an insurance company, communicate with a third party administrator, communicate with the property owner, all of these external stakeholders that need to understand, are you really doing a good job, the right job, and the most efficient, cost efficient job? And then last but not least, and this is the one that really rings true for me with Mitigate because of how good it does in the documentation piece. I have a lot of sympathy for the adjuster that's looking at this documentation coming in and the pressure on that adjuster to say, if I close this file, is it going to stay closed? Because that's the pain point on the adjuster, right? I don't want an auditor to look at this file, after I've closed it and tell me, why did you close this file? Because it doesn't fit the mold. Something was wrong, something was different, and there's nothing in here to stand up why it was different. There's a lot of pressure on that adjuster to make sure that those files aren't going to get audited, they're not going to get reopened, and there wasn't an exception there that wasn't captured. So Mitigate is plugged into that entire tree of communication where all of those pain points exist across all of those stakeholders. And that's what really makes it unique, is because it's not just a field documentation tool. It's a field documentation tool that's built on the CoreLogic platform that lives across the entire claims cycle so that that data can serve all of those stakeholders.
Those are some details and fantastic ones as well. You talked about saving time and solving issues. I think some watching might be thinking, how tough is this to onboard or to integrate
Yeah.
with our company? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I set a goal when we began the process with Mitigate that if we build an application that takes any longer than an hour of training, then we failed, right? We need to be able to train a technician who has never used the application to be successful on their own with the application in the field in an hour or less. And if we can't do that, then there's something wrong. The app's not simple enough. It's not intuitive enough. And we've achieved that. That one of the ways that we validated that is through beta testing, right? How much time do I need to devote to an individual so that I can get them up and running and working in the application if they've never touched Mitigate before? And have validated that it's about a 45-minute cycle. It's about how long it takes for somebody to really understand and look at the application, even being unfamiliar with mitigation documentation at large, and get them out in the field and capable of navigating through the app and capturing that documentation on their own. Most software tools and implementation and deployment take a lot longer than that. Take a lot more time to really immerse the user in understanding how to use the tool. But Mitigate's built in such a way that it's got workflows inside of it. So if I need to build, for example, a reading location on a project, it walks me through it and says, here's the first thing you got to do, take a picture of that location. Here's the second thing you've got to do. Tell me what instrument it is. Tell me what the drying goal is. And then here's the last thing you need to do. Just give me a quick description of the location. And then it builds that profile out for you. The other thing that's really unique that really mitigates, pun intended there, the amount of training necessary, is that the app is also built to put the tools that you need where you need them. And I'll give you a really good case in point. So one of the things as an industry that we don't do very well is photo documentation, right? Create really good photo records of a job. And the way that Mitigate is built, I've got a photo capture tool built in every single one of my data screens so that if I want to take a picture of, for example, the damage on a floor, that image capture is right where the damage information is being documented, what percent of the floor is affected in what room, et cetera. So we automatically capture the room, the technician, the date, the time, the fact that it's a damaged floor, and all the technician had to do is hit capture photo, hit my shutter button, done. The rest of it's all being done for them in the background. So not only does it ensure the technician knows they need to take a photo, but we capture all that metadata at the same time so the reporting looks beautiful, right? So it saves time, saves effort, and really helps ensure that those steps in the workflow aren't being missed.
A testament to all the work you've done behind the scenes in advance of rolling out this innovation to get all this in place to save time for the companies and the technicians. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this. How does Mitigate work with or complement the ANSI IICRC S500 standard for professional water damage restoration, a document I think you're aware of?
Just a wee bit, right? So the S500 has been a passion of mine in addition to the technical side of our industry because that really houses, right, the core of what really is the agreed upon scope of what as a restorer I really need to do or need to know to be a professional, right? That's the lifeline of our industry. And to have an application like Mitigate be a successful tool for a restoration organization, restoration business, it needs to embody that standard of care. So that's been a top of mind, part of the development cycle throughout the entirety of Mitigate is how do we bring standard of care into the app to help a restoration company really, really deploy the S500 as a standard operating procedure in your business. So there are several pieces of the app that do that. Obviously the simple stuff is that you've got to, manifest and measure against equipment recommendations or equipment requirements that the S500 produces. But a big one for me is that there are so many pieces to the S500 that are intended to help you as a restorer document the project well, so that you can make good drying decisions that other apps just don't do. And it's always been amazing to me. And I'll give you one real simple example. The S500 says that when you document the amount of moisture in a building, that you have to identify the assembly the water is in, but then document the moisture in the materials that comprise that assembly. And when I look at all of the other applications that are out there, they don't do that, right? They document that a floor is 22 points of moisture. Well, that tells me nothing, right? A floor, what do you mean a floor? What's the floor made out of, right? How many layers are in the floor? How deep into that assembly did the water migrate? And how wet are each of those layers at that location? So the complexity that's necessary there is much higher than what digital documentation often allows. At the same time, the caveat to that is that even though the complexity is greater, we can't make the app more complex. It's got to be simple to use. So we put a lot of time and care in how we built, again, that workflow I referenced earlier to build out a moisture location so that A, it's simple to do, but B, it guides the technician to be compliant with the standard of care. So that's just one example of how we do that, really paying attention to what is prudent by the restore. What is the common prudent action, and then how do we build that into the workflows to ensure it happens?
You touched on this, other apps you mentioned that fall short of providing what is really needed. Can you speak to how Mitigate is superior to other similar products, or are there similar products to this?
Yeah, so I'll use some of the phrases that I've heard from our beta testers to kind of describe this. Because I ask that question commonly with our beta test group, especially those that have experience with other applications, including Mika. The prior application from CoreLogic. that is being used for field documentation. And that commonly the response I get from technicians that have experience using these other applications is, things like this. This is the app our technicians have actually been asking for, not the office, not the project management, not the insurance company, but our technicians have been asking for an app like this. And that's really based on, again, the fact that the key in our beta testing, the focus in our beta testing was the responses from those technicians. Here's the tool, go use it. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. Jumping on video calls on jobs with those technicians and walking through their pain points as they went through the app, and then listening to them about how it should be done, right? Where should that button be? What should it say? And where should it be on screen so that when you have a meter in one hand and the app in the other hand, it's easy for you to tap the button with your thumb? I mean, little things you don't think about unless you're really focused on making the technician's life better. And that's what's different in Mitigate. It's not designed for the project manager. It's not designed for the estimator. The output is, but not the app. Right. And that's where most of, and really all of these other products have missed the mark. They're not designing it for the tech on their back in the middle of a crawl space at 2 o'clock in the morning with a meter in one hand and a phone in the other. You've got to think about that person and the realities of that world. And that's what Mitigate does different. And that's how it's different.
So I'm a little surprised that others haven't thought about that, or maybe not enough people. So that's fantastic. You're thinking about the technician, and I can't imagine being out there at 2 in the morning in a crawl space needing help. And there it is. You've got it for
Yep.
them. So good work on that.
Wonderful.
Those watching this program, business owners, those in charge of the money, they might wonder about the financial impact this will have on their operations. So I know you talked about the technician side of
Mhm.
things. Can you speak to the financial side as well?
Yeah, and I want to express that from a couple of different angles. One angle is from kind of what I'm going to call the macro view, right? What is the ultimate purpose of documentation? The ultimate purpose of documentation as a business owner is risk management, right? So that's the ultimate purpose. If I've got solid documentation where I know what every photo is of, I know what every moisture reading is related to, I know my readings are compliant with the standard of care for how they're being taken. That's a massive amount of risk management, and that has to be incorporated into any of the value propositions you look at for any tool that you have in your business, software or otherwise. So that's kind of the macro level, but kind of zeroing in a little bit closer into the kind of the micro level. If I was just to write out a value proposition statement for return on investment for the application in a business, then I'll cite a few specific pieces. One is the LiDAR capability. That in and of itself is a massive time saver. So one of the features that we have in the application that's super, super cool, but a massive time saver is that for the first time as a technician, I can use my device and instantly generate a floor plan for the structure that I'm mitigating without having to take a bunch of pictures and send them off to a third party and wait for all that to come back 12 hours later. Well, that's too late, right? Water mitigation is right now. Right? I need that floor plan right now because I need to install equipment right now. I need to take readings right now. So having that ability to leverage the Apple or iOS LiDAR hardware and instantly generate a sketch, and not just any sketch, by the way, a very, very accurate sketch. They're really unique part of the way that we use LiDAR and Mitigate, where once I've generated the entire floor plan, Apple has a wonderful algorithm for creating that so that the scale of the scan is very, very accurate. But the kind of the weak spot in that technology is that I may be 5% off on all of my measurements, right, across that entire scale. So we have built a calibration feature into it that once you're done with your scan, you tap one wall, put a real measurement against that one wall, and it readjusts the entire scale that came from Apple to be extremely accurate for the floor scan. So it's immediate, it's highly accurate, and I've got the floor plan for my house, 3,500 square feet. I can do an entire scan of my property in 15 minutes. It would have taken me an hour and a half to draw that out. at that same level of accuracy. So massive, massive time saver. So that's one of the first things I would point to for as far as kind of return on investment to a business owner. You want accurate sketches, you want them now, and you want to save a massive amount of time doing it. Mitigate's your answer.
This is a new product, but do you have any case studies or field reports that have proven that all this is working for not just in testing, but will work in the field?
Yeah. So right now, what we have is we have slightly over 600 beta testers that are all using the app in production. So these aren't folks that are kicking the tires and just creating bogus jobs and just saying, oh yeah, looks pretty, like it. These are folks that have fully transitioned to Mitigate in their business and are using it day in and day out for live production work. So that in and of itself is a massive testimony to how well the application is working. Transitioning out of the beta phase into the live production phase of the app, we are going to actually publish several of those beta testers as case studies and get into specific time studies. How long did it take you in Mitigate versus how long it took you in other applications or even in paper? So we will have those available through the CoreLogic website.
You talked about how easy it is to learn the system, how to use the technology. Uh, but let's talk about that again, because those watching may be thinking, well, I've got these field technicians that are not very tech savvy. They're good workers. They
Yep.
might need some help. Can you talk about the training and support that CoreLogic will provide for Mitigate?
Yeah, so we have training available in a couple of different formats. One is if you're in it, because every personality is a bit different for how we like to absorb that kind of information. So we have a full user manual, right? So if you just like to be able to look it up and say, where's the button to do this, right? You can just look it up in the PDF user manual. We have the traditional learning environment training where you can sign up and just attend modules that are pre-recorded and say, I'm really interested in learning about how to manage equipment using Mitigate. So you can take that module. If you take all of those modules, again, it's about a 45-minute cycle to go through that training to take all of those modules. If you'd prefer just to attend a webinar with a live trainer, we have those too. And for this first several weeks of Mitigate being launched, those webinars are going to be available on a daily basis, a couple times a day. As we kind of get to the point where fewer people are needing that live training, we're still going to have it on a weekly basis. So whatever format works best for you, we have that format available.
Well, I think we're to the point where if people want to learn more, get ready to onboard this innovation, what can they do to make that happen?
So the best thing to do is to go to CoreLogic's website and just tap on products and go down to Mitigate. We have a great product page there that houses all of the information about Mitigate, including the link over to how to access into the training and all the support resources that are available for Mitigate. So I would go there first. There's also a couple of great videos on there that talk a little bit about the product itself. So if you just want to understand more about the value of Mitigate, there's some great information there on that as well. So just go to CoreLogic.com. Click over into product, down to Mitigate. It's in the restoration product family, and learn all you can.